after needing to learn some, landlording advice and how to remodel some things in my house, I was able to find Bigger Pockets and other real estate podcasts and forums to meet the large community that was all about this stuff.
Welcome to Trial to Triumph, hosted by Caleb Johnson, the show about leaning into life's constant testing on your way to realizing your biggest blessings.
How's it going, everyone? This is Caleb Johnson, the host of From Trial to Triumph, and I'm very excited about our guest, Zack Niemeyer. Zack is a syndicator. He started off house hacking property. That's how he got his foot in the door in real estate, and I know a lot of us are, or a lot of people listening to this show are kind of in that space where you don't know where to start, or you just want to get the foot in the door. So today should be a really good show. Zack, welcome. How are you?
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Caleb.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, excited to be.
So can you give our listeners just a quick background about how you got started and just where you came from?
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in a small town called Cave Creek, Arizona. It's just north of Phoenix metro area, and came from a family that, my dad was a small business owner, plumbing contractor. And so I kind of grew up in, kind of learned to work hard and kind of, make a name for yourself, and that, life's not easy kind of thing from that side of things. And after graduating high school, I decided to go down to ASU for engineering school. So didn't quite know what an engineer was at the time, or what it would mean for my career past that, but I thought it sounded pretty cool. So after getting my degree, I got an internship doing HVAC, basically engineering design for commercial buildings. And through that, I learned that I really liked the, design of commercial buildings, and kind of got involved with, a lot of different cool projects, from new construction, like apartments, to office buildings, and got to see a lot of cool, projects go up from start to finish through that, and got me really excited about real estate. Didn't quite know how I would be in the space yet, but that was kind of the first step. And it was soon after that I ended up purchasing my first house. And kind of before I go to into that, I'll just say that from my engineering background, I ended up transitioning into a sales role, where I went from designing commercial HVAC systems to selling them, more of an engineering sales role, hybrid. So through that, I was able to vastly and quickly improve my income and have more flexibility in my schedule to be able to focus on real estate on the side and continue to grow in that space, while having the flexibility with this new career path. And then through that process, I got into real estate and to where I am now, and continuing to grow and learn. And yeah, every day, getting into something new. So
yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I kind of want to touch on, you mentioned your father had a small business, and my dad never had a small business, but I remember him just really drilling into me work ethic. We would he has been a library, worked at a library for 30 plus years as a manager. So I remember, he paid me to read books and kind of clean up around the library. So I kind of come from that background as well, and just want to kind of pick apart. Is there any, what really did you take from that?
Yeah, I got a couple, stories from that side of things. So I would say, my dad really, and both my parents really helped instill that nothing comes free in the world, and that you have to work hard to get what you want in life, whether you want to do the work or not sometimes. So one, big example that stood out was when I was in middle school. I was at a friend's house, and we were just messing around, and ended up breaking his mom's laptop, and basically knocked it over and broke the screen on it. And at the time, I knew that it was bad. I didn't really know the cost of what I had done. And so my dad basically ended up costing $500 to fix it. So my dad basically said, I'm going to put you to work for 100 hours at $5 an hour, and you can see what it costs your time and labor to replace something like this. So he had me doing yard work around the house, like digging ditches, picking up, debris and nails and trash around the yard, because we were remodeling part of the house at the time. And so I basically learned, the not so nice way of, what things cost in the world. And as a young kid, it really hit home with me that, nothing's free in the world kind of thing. And you have to really, put an effort in. And that was for something that, I didn't plan or didn't want to happen, but it instilled the drive for me to say, okay, well, what if I did want to buy something, or, if I wanted money for myself, it kind of got my gears turning a little bit about, what that would mean. So I got my first job right at 16 as soon as I got my license, and worked at a restaurant and through high school. And then I did, worked in the field for plumbing in the summers through that as well, during college. So, got to learn what it's like to work on a construction site, and really made me thankful that I was in school to get my degree. The trades are hard work, so there's some good money, but it's tough.
Yeah. If you, you can always use your mind right to work, and if you use your hands, eventually your body's going to wear out. So might as well use your brain, because
Yeah,
that's way better.
Definitely.
And how old were you when that first happened with the laptop?
Oh, I was probably maybe just 13 or so, 13 or 14. I was pretty young still. At the time I maybe had an small allowance, but I never had actually worked for any, money before. Everything I had was just, gifts from, birthdays and Christmas before that, or going school shopping. So my first time actually having to work to pay for something, and it was something I, didn't want to have to buy. So I think that's what I still remember that story, going back all this time now. So
Yeah. It sounded like that was a turning point for you. And I don't think there's many people or kids these days that do that. And I sound like an old man saying that, kids these days.
no, it's the truth though. I'd say a majority of the people I know, not maybe a majority, but a good amount that I know from college, had never worked through school, in high school, or even in college. And their first job was, once they graduated at 22, looking for their first, career, was their first time, stepping foot in, to a working role. Now, a lot of people I know also did work previous and through college, but, there is a good chunk of people out there that, I think could maybe benefit from having some experience early on in that space. So.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about, I know when I first met you, you're really big into, you sell HVAC, which is great, especially with our business. And, we deal with HVAC and chillers and boilers and all that. So whenever you had your day job, what really motivated you to start looking into other ventures like real estate?
So I sell, chillers, big, large air handling equipment for commercial and industrial applications. I'm kind of the liaison from the engineering, design, architecture side to the contractor end user side. So, it's 100% commission role, and it allows me to be flexible in my, setting my hours to look into real estate. Now, getting into real estate, I didn't know much about it. No one in my family was in the business, whether it would be in, multifamily or even residential flips, renting. I knew nothing about it at all, really. No background, but I did know that me and all my buddies were, at the time of graduation, paying $500, a piece or so, give or take, to, three of us to rent a house. And I thought that, maybe if I could buy a house, depending on what that looked like, I could maybe have them move in with me, because we were looking, or at least coming up soon. So maybe they could live with me and pay me rent, and I'd be the landlord kind of thing. And it kind of, just between talking to, my friends and my parents, it seemed like it was a good opportunity to look into. So was able to find a house in Tempe, where we were living at the time, where ASU is, and ended up finding a place, buying it, basically my mortgage was around $1,200, and I had 3 buddies move in, each paying $500 a piece. So, I was essentially living for free. We were splitting the utilities. I was making a little money even on top of that. And I thought life was pretty good. I was like, I could make something out of this. So that's kind of when I really started to like real estate. It was like, being able to make your money work for you in a way. And it was a win-win for me. It was a win-win for me and my friends, because my friends got a place to live that was cost effective, and I got rent out of it, and everyone was happy, kind of thing. So it was kind of my first start into the real estate world, and I didn't know it was called house hacking at the time, but after needing to learn some landlording advice and how to remodel some things in my house, I was able to find Bigger Pockets and other real estate podcasts and forums to meet the large community that was all about this stuff. And I just kind of started going, diving headfirst and getting as much information on it as I could. So
when you were house hacking to your buddies, were you the main? I mean, did you act like the property manager, or was it more we're all kind of friends and we just happen to pay Zach?
Yeah, that's kind of the relationship we had at the time. So at first I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, my buddies were all paying me, just cash, and they would just live with me, and we were just kind of friends living with Zack, kind of thing. And it didn't really feel like I was a landlord, and I didn't have any leases or anything written up. I mean, it was very, very, I guess, informal. But it worked for a while. But with everything, as you grow and do more, I mean, there's more that comes to it. And that was kind of what really happened was when I started to having to change the way I was doing things was when I went into the HVAC sales world. My first job sent me away for 6 months for training, and so I actually had to get formal leases in place for my friends and even rent out my bedroom to a stranger. So I had to be learn about being a kind of a remote landlord overnight. And then when I came back from that training a few months later, I realized that I had, put a year lease on my own bedroom. But luckily my next door neighbor's house was for sale. So I ended up buying my next door neighbor's house. All my buddies that were in that first house moved in with me again. And then I rented out, the remainder of that first house. And then I got my first hands-on landlording experience across the street, essentially, next door to where I was. So, yeah, it was just it just all kind of fell into place in a very obscure way, but it's kind of what led me to where I am now. And that's when I really started, getting into this space and really enjoying it, saying, how do I grow and scale from here but, the first thing I ran into is I knew I didn't want to just buy one house, every year or two at a time. I wanted to figure out how I can grow and scale faster and bigger. And listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast, kind of learned about multifamily and syndication and, buying bigger properties that, you can use the help of other people's money to take down. And so after renting out my houses for a few years, I decided, I wanted to get out of that space and go into syndication.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that's funny, moving back and realizing that there's a year-long lease, because I've done things like that, with some deals, and luckily real estate is forgiving. So sometimes we can make mistakes, and it turns out all right most of the time. Sometimes it's something bigger, but I've been there, and that's funny.
Yeah, it was really funny. I literally moved back home to my house that I couldn't actually live in anymore. I had rented out my own house myself. So.
You mentioned kind of nonchalantly that you were able to buy the neighbor's house next door, and I think to someone listening, we think, maybe me as a perfectionist think, well, how did you just have the money? Maybe can you get into how you finance that? Was it favorable loan terms, or did you just have some money set aside?
Yeah, so this is pretty funny, I guess. So I was pretty big into cars through college, and I was always kind of working on cars with my buddies, fixing them up, trading them, selling them, kind of flipping them, kind of thing. And I at the time I graduated, I had a like an early 2000s Corvette, that I was driving around. And basically, the car was worth about 15 to 20K. I didn't have a whole lot of cash outside of that, but when the first opportunity to buy that first house came up, I ended up selling my car and getting a Crown Vic, like old retired police car, and basically for just nothing, and using all the money from my Corvette to buy the house. So I had to kind of give up something I really liked or enjoyed in the car world to get into the real estate space. But, you know, I knew that in the long run it would pay off dividends. So I was able to buy my first house with about, I think, $10,000 to $12,000 with an FHA loan, all in. So from that money, I was able to get in the door. And, you know, once I started having, you know, living for free, you know, it made sense that, and I was starting to work it. I was just like, it was a no brainer going in. My payback on that was less than a year, essentially.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Yeah. Looking at, you know, I think, looking at your liabilities. So Robert Kiyosaki defines liability as something that takes money out of your pocket. And I think that's so wise that you have this nicer car. And so maybe downsizing a little bit was actually able to provide you some income. And also, I mean, the benefits of real estate, depreciation, appreciation on top of the rental income, and you being able to see that, and especially at that age, I think it's great. You know, that's really good.
Yeah. I just, you know, I've always thought like, you know, I've wanted to build a life where eventually I can stop working if I want to, you know, hopefully at a younger age than what would be typically considered retirement age. So I've always, you know, made it a priority to find ways to help me get there faster. And, you know, like you were just saying, with the appreciation, depreciation, all, you know, getting the rental income on top of that, it was a small price to pay by, you know, getting rid of a car, which holds, you know, some value of, I guess, sentimental value, but really doesn't really get me anywhere in life. But
right. So let's talk a little bit about the syndication side of things. So a lot of people, they get into the rental business and they, you know, kind of like your story, they get one rental property and then two, and then they kind of realize, well, I can't do this to get to 100 units. It's just not scalable. So that's some people's story, but I'd really like to hear what's the reason that you started pursuing the larger commercial properties?
So I'd say basically after renting, so I was renting my houses bedroom by bedroom to individual strangers. It was really hard, which was the highest profit potential by renting individual bedrooms, because I was renting to college kids going to ASU. So I was making the most money, but it becomes a lot more management intensive, as now you're almost acting as like the parental control manager for the house, because if someone didn't do the dishes, I'm hearing about it from one of the other tenants and stuff like that, because they're all kids right out of high school and they can't adult on their own yet very well. But it was a good learning experience, and it kind of let me manage, you know, different people's personalities and kind of, you know, since we were across the street, I was somewhat friends with them, and we had a good working relationship, and it was usually, you know, shorter term leases, and I'd, you know, trade out people quite frequently, depending on if people, you know, wanted to stay or move somewhere else, because there's a lot of turnover in the college rental space. But I would say the key thing is when I said, do I really want to grow and scale like in the, you know, college rental market, is when the one time my tenants threw a large party. And I think this, like, I'm still like scarred for life over this story, because I had spent a lot of time and money remodeling that house. And it's one thing, you see the finished product. I mean, I did, you know, repainted the whole thing inside and out, did new flooring, new kitchen, cabinets, remodeled the bathrooms, everything. So they say they're having a party, and being in college, I know what that means. It's not just like a few friends get together kind of thing. So I think they felt like inviting me would make it better for them. So they're like, hey, why don't you just stop by? And so like, oh yeah, Zach's a cool landlord. So I I roll up to the house and it's like maybe 10, 11 at night. And there's about, I don't know, 200 people in my 1,800 square foot house. And the place is absolutely like trashed. I mean, you could just imagine. I mean, the like slippery floors from just, I don't know, beer and who knows what. But, I popped my head in. I saw my tenants and I was like, hey, like, this isn't going to fly. I'm sorry. Like, I'm trying to be cool, but, I think this isn't going to work out. So I left. The cops ended up coming and breaking up the party, and I got involved with the police, and they had filed a whole report about it. And it was kind of a mess, but it really got me thinking, like, maybe college kids is not who I want to rent to long term. So that was kind of the defining factor for me, though. Just like, there's other markets you can rent to, like families and like nicer homes in different areas, but I didn't really dabble in that space. I just wanted to kind of get out of it altogether at that point. So I ended up selling both my 2 rental houses near ASU and decided to use all the money. I had, quite a bit of equity at the time. The market was going up. I bought the houses in 2015, sold them in I bought them in 2015, sold them in like 2017, 2018 time, and decided to take all that money and get into syndication from there.
Okay. That's just a funny story, man. From college party to syndicator. I think.
Yeah, right. So awesome. I was like, you know what? This isn't how I envisioned this going. So I think I need to change it up.
I'm done. That's cool. So let's talk about the first syndication deal. How did you, because residential real estate is completely different from commercial, and a lot of people think, how can I get my foot in the door and get my first deal done in a large apartment or commercial, whatever that looks like to them. So how did you do that?
Yeah, that's a good I guess segue there. We can talk about that. So I never thought syndication, I always thought the same thing. Like it's, I kind of out of reach for me. I don't know where to get started. It's like big money stuff. And, how do I get involved? It seems like there's a lot of moving pieces to it. So what made it real for me is listening to the first Jake and Gino podcast on Bigger Pockets. They've been on a few times, I think now, but I don't know how old of an episode it was. But if you just look up Jake and Gino on Bigger Pockets, you can find the two guys. But basically just a medical sales rep and a restaurant owner that got together and decided to syndicate deals. And they were kind of more blue collar and kind of down to earth guys. They just seemed like relatable in a way that made it seem possible. And they just kind of got, put in some elbow grease and kind of got to work and found a deal and made it happen. And I really liked kind of hearing how they were able to do it. And I said, if they can do it and they have confidence that I can do it, then I think I can do it. So they were really inspirational. I ended up going to their first multifamily conference that they held, or one of the first ones that they had. It was out in Nashville. And that's where I would meet a few future partners to get into the syndication space. So went to a real estate conference by myself. I asked a bunch of friends and family to go with me to learn about multifamily syndication. And everyone said, I'm crazy. So I went alone and ended up with, within less than a year, I was in 2 deals. So that was kind of what kickstarted me. I found that, especially in the syndication space, you're never really going to do your first deal like solely alone. I mean, you're almost going to always have to have a partner or 2 or more potentially, getting in the door to your first few deals. So I think that's a big touch point for a lot of people, possibly, is like getting over the fact that, they just can't do it on their own, and being willing to work with other people, maybe people you don't have a great, standing relationship with, but that you can maybe put some trust in to, get something done. So.
Yeah. What did you contribute to those first deals? Was it capital or was it something else?
So the very first one, I had a very small, in the syndication world, you have the general partners, which are the actual operator managers, and the limited partners, which are just passive investors. My first deal, I put in, $100,000 as a passive investor, which is basically like a good chunk of money that I had from selling those houses. And then I also got a small sliver of portion of the general partnership, like 5% or so. And that was mainly just to help the operator look over the P&Ls and kind of track some of the property income and expenses. So we would just review those on occasion, and I would kind of help with some of the high level management stuff. But that's kind of how I got my foot in the door for the first deal. So
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And it's, yeah.
I was going to say that was a 42 unit deal in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I never stepped foot on the property and never even visited it. I did it all remotely. So,
Wow. Yeah, that's so awesome, because I just envisioned myself several years ago learning about real estate and syndications myself and thinking, man, you just bought a 42 unit property and you never stepped on the property. It's thousands of miles away. And that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. So it was a big moment where it was kind of an aha moment where I'm like, wow, there's like huge potential with this kind of stuff. So, from there, we held that property for about just over a year or so, and ended up getting about like a 60%, return on investment after 1 year. So it was a pretty quick, easy in and out home run deal. So
that's great. What I kind of like to talk about. So since you're on both ends, you've seen residential and you've also seen syndicating large apartments. So if you could go back, where would you start off still dealing with college parties, or would you or residential, or would you focus on the syndications if you were to start all over?
I would say that if I were to do it all over again, I would probably like to have the experience I did. And the reason I say that is not that I couldn't do syndication without having that experience, but I think it just gives you a better understanding and overall like kind of compass of what to expect on the end user renter side. They're truly the your customers, and putting yourself in their shoes a little bit and kind of dealing with the day-to-day stuff, I think is just a benefit that you can only get by doing it. I think it's hard to understand without doing it, but on top of that, it helped me build confidence to be able to even do the other deals, or even talk about myself, to raise money for properties, having that background, being able to talk about that with people, I think helps, beef up my resume and help people build trust and confidence in me, because they know that I've been through, from this first initial point to where I am now, and that I didn't just kind of say, oh, I can do, big real estate deals. I don't need any, previous experience. But who knows? I think if you think you can do it without it, you definitely can. But for me, I was happy I had, the path I took to get there.
Yeah, I had that experience too. And I think, like you said, you don't need it, but it's nice to go through that process so you can see what that looks like, and you kind of almost catch the real estate bug and get your foot in the door, even if it's residential, and you can connect with some other people as well that have only focused on the residential.
Yeah, and I even got to get learn about construction and remodels and all that stuff, and kind of know what goes into different parts of a interior exterior rehab, and so just helped me have confidence in that side of space too, because doing, on multifamily, most of the deals that I look at are value add in some form or fashion. So having at least a basic understanding of construction by going through it before helps me kind of evaluate deals a little bit better, I think. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, Zach, I think we're just about out of time, and really appreciate you sharing your story with us. And I always enjoy learning more about your story and just your background. And I just have 3 questions for you before we depart. The first one being, if you can recommend a book to our listeners, what would that book be? Doesn't need to be residential or real estate or business or personal, but any genre.
So a book that I really like, and it's not super popular out there, but it's called Sell or Be Sold. It's by Grant Cardone. If you know Grant Cardone, he's kind of a bombastic character, but listening to the audiobook, it kind of really, he reads the book himself, and the book's basically about how everything in life's sales transaction. Either you're selling something or someone's selling something to you. Anything from, deciding where to go to dinner, or your kids arguing why they need a toy they want, or, why you need to buy or not buy a certain thing, whether it be an investment or personal item. So just really kind of gets you in that mindset of, not to look at everything as a sales transaction, but just realize that, the sales process takes place in a lot of everyday life. And that, because, if you're going to be in the real estate, especially in syndication, you got to be in sales. And even if you don't think of yourself as a salesman, you're going through the sales process by finding investors or even finding deals. So I think it's a good book for everyone to read.
And I've read his 10X book as well. And he is a very vivacious person. And even, he has some great content. And if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about you, potentially invest with you, where's the best place for them to get a hold of you?
You can always just shoot me a personal email. My email's zackniemeyer@gmail.com. It's my first and last name. Or I'm on Instagram. It's zniemeyer. And I post there on occasion. And otherwise, just reach out, and I'm willing to chat or talk about, working together or anything like that. So.
And if you can give our listeners one last piece of advice today, if they can just take one thing away from today, what would that be?
I would say if your goal in life is to, maybe be in real estate or get ahead with money or financially, have an abundance of wealth, I would say the one thing you need to look at is, especially with work, that try to find something you can do where you get paid for adding value or completing a task rather than just trading time for money. I think that's the biggest, mental hurdle for a lot of people where they get stuck is really hard for people to change the mindset of, trading, a salary wage for potential to make a lot more doing a business or doing a real estate deal where there's not a true exchange of money actively happening. But having the foresight and the confidence to see what could be happening on the back end is where all the magic happens. So
being able to work for nothing, and even if you learn, that's how I started too. And I think that's such a good point, that so many people don't want to give up that, that first little bit of time and value to really gain and get the foot in the door. So I think that's really good. Not a lot of people think of that.
Yeah, I think that's what I would say is it took me a little time to get over it, but once I did, I never looked back. So.
Well, Zach, really appreciate your time, brother. It was good to speak with you. And to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
It's time to grab your victory. Find us on the web at redseacapitalgroup.com and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Red Sea Capital Group.